The Martian sky burned with soft orange light, a dusty horizon stretching endlessly beyond the metal towers of New Ares City. Ethan Cole walked through the empty streets, his boots leaving light prints on the red sand. He was tired, not from work, but from life itself. Back on Earth, he had lost everything: his home, his family, and his purpose. So he came to Mars, hoping the silence of another world might give him peace. After days of searching for work, he found something strange. A small, abandoned building stood at the edge of the colony, its sign flickering weakly in the dusty wind. It read, "Lunar Brew, coffee for all species." Inside, everything was broken, old machines covered in rust, chairs scattered, lights half dead. But there was something about it, something that made Ethan stop and stare. He smiled to himself. A cafe on Mars, why not? He bought it with the last of his savings. He wanted a place that felt human, even on an alien planet. For days, he cleaned and fixed everything with his own hands. The smell of old coffee beans and metal filled the air. He worked in silence, only the hum of the Martian wind keeping him company. Then one evening, as the red sun began to fade behind the glass dome of the city, someone knocked on the door. Ethan turned and saw a girl standing there. She wasn't human, but she was beautiful. Her skin shimmered like silver under the dim light, her long dark hair falling softly over her shoulders. Her eyes glowed faintly, like stars trapped in crystal. "I heard you're opening this place," she said, her voice calm and soft. "Do you need help?" Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. "I can make coffee," she added quickly. "Real coffee, not the machine kind." Her smile was gentle but strange, as if she knew more than she was saying. Ethan finally nodded. "Sure, you're hired." From that day, the cafe felt alive again. The lights seemed brighter, the air warmer, and the sound of laughter began to fill the space. Aliens from nearby stations came to taste her brews, and they always said the same thing. "It feels different. It reminds me of home." Ethan watched her work every day. She moved with perfect rhythm, every motion graceful, every smile soft. But there was something about her that didn't feel normal. Sometimes, when no one was around, he saw the air shimmer around her hands, as if time itself bent to her touch. Once, during a storm, the power went out, and everything froze. The sound stopped, the dust in the air stopped moving, even the lights froze mid-flicker. Ethan blinked, confused, and then saw her. Arya stood still behind the counter, her eyes glowing bright blue, the world around her silent. Then, just like that, everything moved again. He gasped. Did time just stop? She turned toward him, a faint smile on her lips. "You shouldn't have seen that." Ethan couldn't speak. His heart pounded as he tried to understand what he had witnessed. The woman who made coffee in his small cafe wasn't just an alien. She was something far greater, something ancient. But instead of fear, he felt curiosity. He wanted to know who she really was, and why she had come to work in his quiet little cafe at the edge of the galaxy. That night, Ethan sat alone after closing, staring out at the faint glow of Mars beyond the window. The city lights shimmered like stars in the distance. He thought about Arya, about her calm voice and her mysterious smile. Maybe fate had brought her here, or maybe something far beyond fate. Either way, Ethan knew one thing. His life was no longer ordinary. The cafe he bought for peace had become a doorway to something far beyond time itself. And as he closed his eyes, he whispered to himself, "I think I just hired the most mysterious barista in the universe." The next few days inside Lunar Brew felt different. Ethan tried to act normal, pretending he hadn't seen Arya freeze time. But deep down, the memory haunted him. Every time he watched her pour a cup of coffee or smile at a customer, he wondered if she was really living in the same moment as him. Sometimes, when the cafe was empty, he noticed small things that didn't make sense. A clock on the wall ticking backward for a few seconds. Steam from a cup hanging motionless in the air. Music skipping in slow motion like a dream. Ethan would blink, and everything would return to normal. He began to think he was losing his mind. One evening, when the last customer left, he decided to ask her. "Arya," he said quietly, "what are you?" She looked at him, her silver eyes calm. "I make coffee," she replied with a small smile. He laughed nervously. "No, I mean, really, what are you?" Arya didn't answer right away. Instead, She walked to the window and stared at the red horizon where the Martian sun was setting. "You humans always ask that," she whispered, "as if knowing will make you safer." Her voice had a strange sadness in it, like someone remembering a lost world. "Time is not what you think," she continued, turning toward him. "For me, it's not a river flowing forward. It's a sea I can walk through." Ethan stared at her, not understanding. "You mean you can travel through time?" Her lips curved slightly. "I don't travel, Ethan. I exist in all moments at once." He felt a chill crawl up his spine. Her words didn't sound like fantasy. They sounded like truth. "But why work here?" he asked. "Why serve coffee to strangers on Mars?" Aria's eyes softened. "Because this cafe is a fixed point in time," she said. "Something that cannot change." She stepped closer, and for a second, he saw flickers of something impossible behind her. Images flashing like broken light. He saw cities of crystal, oceans made of stars, soldiers of fire kneeling before her. Then it was gone. Ethan took a step back, his voice shaking. "You're a queen, aren't you?" Her silence was the only answer he needed. "Yes," she finally said, "but not anymore." There was pain in her tone, a quiet sorrow that filled the room like cold air. "I ruled a civilization that tried to master time," she said, "but we failed." Her eyes glimmered as if remembering endless ages. "When I rewound time to save them, I broke the universe instead." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "So you came here?" She nodded. "This cafe is one of the few places where I can hide from the echoes of what I've done." Her gaze fell to the cup she was holding. "Every time I make coffee, I feel grounded, human." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of machines filled the silence. Ethan didn't know what to say. He just looked at her and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Arya turned to him, her eyes soft, and for the first time, she smiled. A real, human smile. But as the night deepened, strange lights began to flicker outside. Shadows moved beyond the glass dome, and the cafe lights dimmed. Arya froze, her expression turning sharp. "They found me," she said quietly. Ethan looked out the window and saw it. Dark shapes moving across the Martian sands, their eyes glowing like burning clocks. "What are they?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Remnants of the past I destroyed," she whispered, "and they're here for me." Before he could move, the air trembled and the walls of the cafe shimmered like water. Time itself began to twist. The sound of the wind reversed. Cups hovered in midair, and the galaxy outside flickered like a broken film reel. Arya raised her hand, and everything stopped. Her glowing eyes locked onto Ethan. "Stay still," she said. "You're safe if you don't move." He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Outside, reality bent around her like glass melting in slow motion. She stood between two worlds, the past she broke and the future she could never reach. And as time froze again, Ethan realized something he could no longer ignore. The woman who worked in his cafe was not just a barista. She was the queen of time, and her past was coming to claim her. The air inside Lunar Brew turned heavy. It was as if reality itself was holding its breath. The Martian wind outside moved backward, dust flying in reverse. And through the glass, Ethan saw dark shapes crawling from the red dunes. Thin, ghostly figures with hollow faces and clocks burning in their chests. "They're here," Arya whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. Ethan froze where he stood. "What are they?" "Time wraiths," she said softly. "Remnants of ages that should not exist. They are born from broken timelines." The shadows pressed against the cafe's barrier dome, their bodies shifting like smoke, their whispers echoing like thousands of ticking watches. Ethan felt his heart pound. "What do they want?" "Me," Arya replied. "I changed history once, and they never forgave me." Suddenly, the lights flickered and burst, the cafe filled with blue sparks, and time collapsed around them. Chairs floated, cups froze midair, coffee drops hung like brown pearls in motionless space. Ethan reached out, but his hand moved slower than thought. He looked at Arya, and she was already glowing, her hair rising in waves of light, her eyes blazing silver blue. She raised her hand, and everything stopped again. Time itself obeyed her. The wraiths froze outside the window, trapped mid-crawl, their faces twisted in silent rage. But Arya was struggling, her body shaking under the pressure. "You can't hold them forever," Ethan said. Let me help. She laughed weakly. You can't fight what doesn't belong to this reality. Then what can I do? He shouted. Arya looked at him with wide eyes, something dawning inside her. Wait, she whispered. You're human. Ethan blinked, confused, and that matters because humans are unanchored, she said quickly. You exist naturally outside the timeline flow. Your species is unrecorded by the stream of fate. She stepped closer, holding his trembling hands. That's why I came here, Ethan, to the human colonies, to hide behind your kind's strange gift. Her power flared, but cracks of time began to tear through the walls like glowing scars. Outside, the wraiths began to move again, breaking through her freeze, their eyes burning brighter. One of them smashed through the glass, its body made of light and shadow, its voice a scream of broken seconds. Ethan grabbed a metal rod from the counter and swung instinctively. The rod hit the wraith's chest, and to Arya's shock, it screamed. The creature burst into fragments of glowing dust. Arya's eyes widened. You can touch them. Ethan gasped. Guess time doesn't like me either. He stood beside her as more wraiths entered the cafe, twisting the air around them, turning seconds into echoes. Ethan fought clumsily, but every strike burned like fire. Every hit shattered another ghost. For a brief moment, the two stood side by side. One human, one timeless queen, fighting against the impossible. Arya's voice echoed with power. You're stabilizing the timeline by existing near me. Ethan didn't understand, but he didn't need to. He just kept fighting, swinging, refusing to let her stand alone. Finally, with a cry that shook the walls, Arya raised both hands. A blinding wave of light surged from her palms, washing over the cafe. The wraiths dissolved into dust, and time began to move normally again. When it was over, Ethan fell to his knees, breathing hard. Arya looked down at him, her face pale but soft. You saved me, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, we saved each other. She smiled faintly, and the cafe lights flickered back to life. For a few seconds, it almost felt normal again. The faint hum of machines, the smell of coffee, the soft warmth of light against the red horizon. But as Arya turned toward the window, her smile faded. Far beyond the dunes, in the distance, a massive clock-shaped object was forming in the Martian sky. Its gears moved like planets, its core pulsing with the heartbeat of time itself. They're not done, she whispered. The chronarch is waking. Ethan stood beside her, following her gaze. What's that? Her voice trembled. The one who ruled before me, the god of time. The cafe grew silent again, and Ethan realized their battle was only the beginning. He looked at her, still breathing fast, still terrified yet calm. Then we better brew some strong coffee, he said softly. Arya looked at him, and for the first time, she laughed. A sound that made even the broken universe pause for a heartbeat. The next morning, the sky over New Ares City wasn't red anymore. It was gold, glowing with shifting gears and slow-moving rings of light. The people of Mars looked up, speechless, as the heavens turned into a colossal clock made of energy and memory. Every time it ticked, buildings trembled, and shadows rippled through the air. Inside Lunar Brew, Ethan stared at the window, unable to look away. That thing, he whispered. It's getting bigger. Arya stood beside him, her eyes glowing faintly, her face pale. It's the chronarch, she said softly. The one who ruled before me. Her voice was calm, but inside, Ethan could feel her fear. The chronarch can't enter normal space, she continued. He uses echoes of time to break reality open. He's searching for me. Ethan frowned. And when he finds you, he'll erase everything connected to me, including this cafe, she said, her tone almost a whisper. The lights flickered again. Time around them began to stretch. Ethan's reflection in the window moved a second slower than he did. Objects trembled in midair, and outside, small drones began to fall from the sky as gravity lost meaning. Arya stepped forward and placed her hand on the cafe counter, the wood glowing softly under her touch. This place exists outside the normal flow, she said. It's the only anchor I have left. Then we defend it, Ethan said immediately. Arya turned to him, her expression filled with something between surprise and sorrow. Humans, she whispered. always ready to fight for what they don't understand. He smiled faintly. Understanding is overrated. The ground shook violently, and cracks of light split across the floor. Through those cracks, Ethan could see fragments of other worlds. Oceans of crystal, alien forests, floating cities. It felt like the entire universe was folding into the cafe. Arya clenched her fists. He's bending the timeline, trying to collapse this anchor. She looked at Ethan. If he succeeds, Mars will vanish. Then we stop him, he said, his voice steady even as fear filled his chest. She looked at him long and hard, as if searching for something in his eyes. Then she nodded slowly. If you stay here, the timeline will resist his touch. Your human presence stabilizes this zone. He frowned. You're saying I'm a living shield. Exactly, she said. And you're the only one who can do it. Before Ethan could answer, the air outside shimmered, and a massive shadow appeared in the clouds. The Chronarch, a being of pure light and machinery, stood tall above the Martian sky, his eyes burning with ancient power. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the atmosphere like thunder wrapped in music. Aristhea of time, he called. You broke the threads. Return yourself to the loop. Ethan covered his ears, but the sound was inside his mind, shaking his bones. Arya looked up at the glowing figure, her voice calm but trembling. I will not serve the loop again. Her hands blazed with silver fire, and the cafe pulsed with energy. The Chronarch raised his hand, and time shattered like glass. Moments broke apart. Ethan saw 100 versions of himself standing in the same room, each moving differently. He saw Arya in her past, on a throne of light, surrounded by warriors made of starlight. And then he saw her fall, crying as time folded around her. Ethan shouted, Arya, fight it. She turned, her voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. I'm trying. He reached for her, even as the world twisted, and when their hands touched, something impossible happened. The cafe became real again, time straightened, and the Chronarch hesitated. Arya gasped, looking at their joined hands. You're grounding me. Ethan smiled weakly. Guess I make good coffee after all. The Chronarch's light dimmed for a moment. Arya took the chance and lifted her hands toward the sky. A beam of silver energy burst upward, hitting the great clock. The Chronarch screamed, his voice shaking the entire planet. But he wasn't defeated yet. You can't destroy time, Arya whispered. But maybe we can delay it. She looked at Ethan, her voice urgent. If I use my full power, I can seal him again, but I'll disappear with him. Ethan's heart sank. No, he said firmly. There has to be another way. There isn't, she said softly. You'll have to keep the cafe open to hold the anchor. He grabbed her wrist, his voice breaking. You don't have to do this alone. Her eyes shimmered, tears like silver light falling down her cheeks. I was never supposed to meet you, Ethan, but maybe fate was tired of my loneliness. Outside, the great clock roared. Time began to burn. Arya stepped toward the door, glowing like a second sun. Ethan followed, refusing to let her go alone. And as the sky tore apart and Mars trembled under the weight of eternity, the Queen of Time and the human of the cafe walked into the storm together. The moment Ethan and Arya stepped outside Lunar Brew, the world dissolved into chaos. The red sky shattered into 1,000 fragments of glowing time. Mountains floated in the air, rivers flowed backward, and cities flickered between past and future like broken holograms. It was as if Mars itself had been thrown into a storm of memories. Arya stood at the center of it, glowing brighter than ever before, her hair rising in waves of silver light. Her voice echoed through the air, steady yet full of sorrow. This is the time storm, Ethan, a place where moments fight for existence. He could barely hear her over the thunder made of centuries colliding. Everything around them twisted, shifting between seconds. He saw flashes of the past, Arya in royal armor, standing before an army of light. Then flashes of the future, her alone on a dead world, crying beside a broken clock. The storm wasn't just a place, it was her life made real. And the Chronarch stood at the eye of it, his colossal body made of gears and stars, his eyes glowing like twin suns. Aristhea, his voice roared. You stole the loop, and now time will end with you. Arya lifted her hand, her silver energy swirling into rings around her body. I won't let you destroy what I created, she said softly. Not again. The two forces collided, and time exploded. Waves of light ripped through the air, freezing everything they touched. Ethan fell to his knees, shielding his face as the world split in half. He saw Arya floating in midair, her arms glowing like molten light. The chronarch struck her with beams of golden energy, each hit tearing pieces of the storm apart. Ethan could see her weakening, her glow flickering like a candle in the wind. He shouted, "Arya, stop, you can't fight him alone." She turned to him, her eyes filled with pain and determination. "I must, if I don't, everything will collapse." He stood, his body trembling from the strange pressure around him. Every breath felt like it took 100 years. He could feel time pulling at his soul, trying to tear him apart. But when he looked at Arya, he felt something stronger than fear. He ran toward her, pushing through the storm. Every step was agony. Every second stretched into forever. The chronarch saw him and roared, "You are not meant to exist in this realm." Ethan shouted back, "Too bad. I bought this cafe, and I'm not closing it today." He reached Arya and grabbed her hand, his skin burning from her energy. Suddenly, the storm stopped spinning. The chronarch hesitated, his voice thundering with disbelief. "What is this interference?" Arya gasped, realizing what was happening. "Your human existence is stabilizing me again," she said, her voice trembling. "You're grounding the time waves." Ethan winced. "Then hold on tight, because we're not done yet." Arya closed her eyes, and her glow intensified. She drew power from the storm itself, redirecting its chaos into a single pulse of energy. The chronarch raised his hand to strike again, but Ethan shouted, "Now, Arya." Together, they unleashed the energy. A blinding wave of silver and gold light shot through the air, hitting the chronarch straight in the chest. His body cracked like glass, gears flying in every direction. But even as he fell, he began to laugh, a deep, echoing sound that made Ethan's blood run cold. "You cannot destroy time," he said. "You only delay its hunger." Then he shattered into stardust, dissolving into the storm. The silence that followed was unreal. The storm began to fade, the broken pieces of Mars falling back into place. The sky turned red again, calm and still. Ethan looked around, panting. The cafe still stood behind them, untouched, glowing faintly with blue light. He turned to Arya, but she was fading, her body turning transparent. "Arya," he shouted, reaching for her hand. She smiled softly. "It's all right, Ethan, the loop is stable now, but I can't stay." He shook his head. "No, you promised we'd fix it together." Tears glimmered in her eyes. "We did." The wind around them slowed, and she placed her hand on his cheek. "Promise me you'll keep the cafe open," she whispered, "because as long as it stands, I'll still exist in the seconds between moments." He nodded, his throat tight. "I promise." With one last smile, she faded into light. The sky cleared completely, and Mars was quiet again. Ethan stood alone before the cafe, the hum of the machines echoing faintly inside. He looked up at the stars, whispering to the silence. She was more than a queen, she was the heartbeat of time. And somewhere beyond the stars, a faint voice replied, "I'm still here, Ethan." Weeks passed since the time storm. The sky above Mars was quiet again, painted in the same calm orange Ethan once admired. The people of New Ares City went back to their normal lives, pretending they hadn't seen the sky tear open or heard the voice of a god echo across the stars. But Ethan couldn't forget. Every day he opened Lunar Brew at sunrise, cleaned the counters, polished the glass, and brewed coffee for travelers and colonists. From the outside, it looked like any other cafe again. But inside, something had changed. The air felt alive, like the space itself was breathing. Sometimes when he wiped a table, the surface shimmered faintly, showing reflections that weren't his own. He tried to tell himself it was just stress, that the fight, the storm, and the light had left him seeing things. But deep inside, he knew better. The moment Arya disappeared, something inside him stayed connected. It was as if her energy, her essence, had not left the cafe. One night, after closing, Ethan sat by the counter, sipping cold coffee and staring at the empty seat where she used to stand. The hum of the machines filled the silence. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered, and for a moment, time slowed down. The The steam rising from his cup froze in the air, and a soft whisper brushed his ear, still keeping it open. Ethan froze, his heart racing. "Arya," he said quietly, his voice shaking. No one answered, but the faint smell of her favorite blend filled the air, cinnamon and starroot. He stood, looking around. "If you're here, say something." The lights flickered again, and a faint silhouette appeared behind the counter. She wasn't fully there, just a shimmer of silver light shaped like her. Her voice echoed softly. "I told you, Ethan, I exist between seconds." He smiled through tears. "You kept your promise." Her image flickered. "And you kept yours." He wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, but his fingers passed through light. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "No," she said gently. "I'm everywhere time flows. But this cafe, this is where I feel alive." Ethan sat down again, his eyes never leaving her fading glow. "Can you ever come back?" She hesitated. "Not in the way I was." Her voice trembled. "The Chronarch's energy still lingers. But you, Ethan, you are a paradox now." He frowned. "A paradox?" She nodded. "You survived a place where no human should exist. The storm changed you. Your timeline doesn't flow like others." Ethan laughed softly. "So what does that make me?" Her tone warmed. "A guardian." He blinked. "A guardian of what?" "Of this anchor," she said. "As long as you're here, no force can break time again." He shook his head in disbelief. "Me? A time guardian running a coffee shop?" She smiled faintly. "Even the universe needs warmth sometimes." Outside, the Martian winds whispered softly against the glass. Ethan looked out, the horizon glowing faintly blue, traces of Arya's power still woven into the sky. Customers came and went through the days that followed, but strange things began to happen. Sometimes, people claimed to see the same moment twice. Sometimes, they said the cafe clock ran backward, but their drinks stayed warm. Once, a traveler swore he heard music that came from nowhere, a melody that made him cry. Ethan didn't deny it anymore. He knew Arya was still there, guiding the cafe, protecting the timeline. Every time the bell above the door rang by itself, he whispered a quiet thank you. Every time the lights flickered gently, he smiled and said, "Welcome back." Then, one evening, a small holographic letter appeared on the counter, glowing in silver light. It read, "The Chronarch stirs again, deep beyond time, but this time, we will face him together." Beneath it was her name, Aristhea, Queen of Time. Ethan looked at the letter, his chest tightening with hope and fear. He poured a fresh cup of coffee and placed it beside the glowing message. "Then let's get ready, my queen," he said softly. The lights in the cafe shimmered once, like stars winking in approval. Outside, the great clock hidden within the Martian sky ticked once. And somewhere beyond the limits of the universe, Arya's voice whispered through the silence. "Every story begins again, Ethan." The night over Mars was silent, too silent. Even the wind outside Lunar Brew had stopped whispering. Ethan felt it before he saw it, a strange vibration in the air, like the ticking of a giant unseen clock. He looked up and saw the stars shifting, aligning into a perfect circle above the red sky. The silver letter on the counter began to glow. Words reshaped themselves, forming a single message. "He has awakened. Ethan, it's time." Ethan stood, his heart pounding. He knew what it meant. The Chronarch had returned, stronger, deeper, rising from the hidden layers of time. He looked around the cafe, every chair, every cup, every reflection trembling softly. The walls shimmered like they were made of light and memory. He whispered, "Arya, are you here?" The lights flickered once, then again, and suddenly she appeared, not as a ghost this time, but as a figure made of living silver flame. Her form was clear, her face radiant, and her eyes blazed like starlight. "I don't have much time," she said softly. "But neither does he." Ethan stepped closer, his voice breaking. "You came back." Her faint smile carried warmth and sorrow. "I never left. I just followed the seconds until they led me back to you." Outside, the Martian sky cracked open again, revealing the great gears of the Chronarch's domain. But this time, it wasn't a storm, it was a judgment. Massive rings of light began to descend, wrapping around the planet like chains. Arya turned to Ethan. "He's trying to reset the entire timeline. Everything will begin again, even us." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we stop him, just like before. She shook her head gently. Not like before. This time I can't seal him without a counterweight in the present. Her voice trembled. I need someone bound to time. Someone who can hold the timeline still. Ethan realized what she meant. Me. Arya nodded slowly. Your existence stabilizes the human timeline. If you link with me, we can rewrite the loop. He laughed weakly. You mean tie myself to a goddess of time? Her lips curved. No, Ethan, you'd be tying yourself to me. The air trembled again. The sound of the chronarch's roar echoed across the sky. The ground split. Light poured through the cracks. Ethan reached out, holding her hand. What happens if we fail? Then everything resets, and we'll never meet again. He took a deep breath, his voice steady. Then we won't fail. Arya looked at him, and for the first time since she became the Queen of Time, her heart felt human. She raised her hands, threads of silver light connecting her to him. Time began to fold around them, bending like silk in a storm. The chronarch appeared above, colossal and burning. His voice shattered the air. You defy the loop again. Ethan shouted, we defy your control. Arya closed her eyes, her voice clear. For every heartbeat that ever loved, for every moment that ever mattered, we choose our own time. Their powers intertwined, light and warmth filling the horizon. The chronarch screamed, his form cracking, his golden eyes dimming as the light engulfed him. Mars shook, and then, silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, he stood in the cafe again. The air was still, the walls solid, the hum of the machines calm and steady. The sky outside was pure and red once more. But Arya was gone. He looked around, his voice soft. Arya. Nothing answered, only the gentle ticking of the cafe clock. He sat by the counter, closing his eyes, the memory of her voice echoing in his mind. Hours passed, and as dawn rose over Mars, a faint shimmer appeared behind the counter. A cup of coffee sat there, steaming. Next to it, carved faintly into the wood, were words that glowed silver. Every second we shared still exists. Ethan, I am the time between your heartbeats. He smiled through tears, whispering, you always loved poetic exits. The cafe door opened on its own, a soft breeze sweeping through. The sunlight touched his face, and for a brief moment, he heard her laugh, clear, soft, eternal. He whispered to the empty room, welcome home, my queen. The lights flickered once in reply. Outside, the Martian sky shimmered like glass. And somewhere beyond the reach of any galaxy, the Queen of Time smiled, watching the man who refused to let her fade. Because some stories never end. They just find new moments to begin again.